Spencer Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874. He was born to American-born Jenny Jerome and Lord Randolph Churchill in Blenheim Palace near Oxford, England. During a visit to Blenheim, Winston Churchill was born. The Blenheim Palace was built for John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, who was Winston Churchill's ancestor from the 18th century. As a child, a nurse looked over Winston and his brother Jack, since their parents were often busy away from home. Winston's hobby was collecting stamps from all over the world. He was given the nickname Winnie. Winston attended his first school at age 7. He disliked his first school because he was given inadequate food, beaten by his teacher, and received harsh punishments. For example, after receiving a beating from his teacher for stealing sugar, he kicked his teacher's straw hat to bits. The next school he went to, he learned to swim and ride horses. Next, he went to a public school called Harrow School in 1888. In 1893, he was sent to Army College in Sandhurst. During the Boer War, he was captured by the Boers, but managed to escape. In 1900, he was elected as a Member of Parliament. In 1908, as a president of the Board of Trade, Winston Churchill led social reforms, introduced trade protections, labor exchange, and unemployment insurance legislation. He was the Home Secretary in 1910. In 1911, he took charge of the Royal Navy and was made Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1924. In 1940, he became Britain's Prime Minister.
He was not a dictator. Churchill inspired Britain to not give in to Hitler and showed the Allies that Hitler can be blocked. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender. He gave the Allies hope in defeating Hitler, making him one of the most iconic leaders of Great Britain. Churchill led Britain to victory against Hitler's forces. In the Battle of Britain in 1940, Churchill's forces prevailed.
Winston Churchill was a conservative and a realist that never failed. He served as a prime minister twice from 1940 to 1945, and again in 1951 to 1955. Winston also served as a leader of opposition in British Parliament. Winston Churchill was against taxes and once stated that there is no such thing as a good tax. His political career lasted for decades. He also believed that politics was seen as a debate that never ends. He stated, "It has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all of the others that have been tried."
In 1908, as a president of the Board of Trade, Winston Churchill led social reforms, introduced trade protections, labor exchange, and unemployment insurance legislation. In April 1940, he became chairman of the Military Coordinating Committee. He also became the Prime Minister of Great Britain in 1940 and helped the Allies in a successful strategy with the US and Soviet Union. He did this by mobilizing the free world in the fight against tyranny and oppression.
He is the one who first promoted military aircraft and set up the Royal Navy Air Service. Moreover, he persuaded the U.S. to provide supplies and ammunition for the Allies, such as guns, tanks, and planes. So, on March 1941, the U.S. came up with the Land Lease Program, where the Congress authorized the sale, lease, transfer, exchange of arms and supplies to any country whose defense the President deems vital to the defense of the United States. To boost the national morale during the war, he gave stirring speeches in Parliament and on the radio. 5 months later, on August 14, 1941, Winston Churchill met Franklin Roosevelt in Newfoundland for the Atlantic Conference. The Atlantic Charter then released the broad statement of the war aims of two countries. In January 1943, during World War II, Winston Churchill met Franklin Roosevelt again in Casablanca, Morocco, discussing plans on attack on all fronts, invade Sicily and Italy, send forces to the Pacific, and better aid to Soviet Union. April 1940, he became chairman of Military Coordinating Committee. At the same time, in 5 months later, he became on August 14, 1941, Winston Churchill met Franklin Roosevelt in Newfoundland for the Atlantic Conference. The Atlantic Charter then released a broad statement of the war aims of the two countries.
In 1945, 2 months after Germany's surrender, British voters, tired of war, strove for liberal ideals and denounced conservatives, including Churchill. After that, he spent several years warning Britons and Americans of the dangers of the Soviet expansion. In 1951, at age 77, Churchill became Prime Minister again. During this time, he tried to ease hostility between the East and the West, but was unsuccessful. In 1953, Queen Elizabeth made him a Knight of the Order of the Garter. April 5, 1955, Churchill retired from being Prime Minister but remained a Member of Parliament until 1964. After suffering a series of strokes, he began planning his own state funeral dubbed Operation Hope Not. Winston Churchill died January 24, 1965, at 90 years old.